Hi, it's time for another verb of the day. Today's verb is spit, and this verb was suggested by the viewer Artem. So thank you, Artem, for making a suggestion. Now let's take a moment and look at some of the definitions or the ways that we can use this verb. The most common way the verb spit gets used means to eject saliva forcibly from one's mouth. So, you might do this after brushing your teeth, right? You spit out the toothpaste and things that have bubbles that have formed to clean your teeth, right? Other people might do that to clear out other things from one's mouth, but it's that ejecting or coming out. A second way the verb spit gets used means to utter in a hostile or aggressive way. So you might hear someone describing another person spitting obscenities at someone, right? So they're cursing, they're swearing, and they're doing it in a rather hostile way. A third way you may encounter the verb spit generally relates either to cooking or fires. And so when there are either small bursts of sparks or maybe some hot fat, and they're kind of making little kind of explosive noises, again, we might encounter the verb that way. For now, you should know that spit is an irregular verb. If you want to make the progressive form of this verb, we're going to double the ending consonant, so double the T before you add ing. And we're doing that because spit is a one-syllable verb that ends in the pattern consonant, vowel, consonant. The past tense and the participle form of our verb require a spelling change. So the I is going to change to the letter A, and we're going to pronounce that spat. Spat. Okay? Now, let's move on and talk about phrasal verbs. There are so many phrasal verbs with spit, so we'll focus our discussion on those today. The first phrasal verb you might encounter is to spit at. So we can have what's considered maybe a more literal meaning, right? Again, you're ejecting or propelling saliva, something else from one's mouth in the direction of someone or something. An example of how you might see this used. That protester spat at the cop. Right? So again, this is considered a very aggressive, hostile thing, right? Kind of also gross, right? We don't want bodily fluids from another person on us. That is an example of a simple past tense sentence. Now, a second way you could encounter spit at can mean to treat someone or something with scorn, with contempt, or disregard. An example of this. You're spitting at all of us by leaving in the middle of this project and going to our competitor. So this might be something a boss or supervisor says to an employee. So they're very disappointed with this person leaving in the middle of some kind of engagement or project. You're spitting at all of us is an example of the present progressive. Another phrasal verb you might encounter is to spit in. This can have a couple meanings. We'll start with that literal, right, of expelling or propelling saliva from one's mouth into something. So an example of this, maybe you're at the dentist, you're having some work done, right? They might ask you kind of to sit up, lean over, and please spit in the sink, right? So they're directing where it should go. That's an example of an imperative. A second way to use spit in could mean to eject an object from one's mouth, again, into something. An example of this. The kids spit their sunflower seeds in a paper cup. Right? So they're eating these things, kind of removing the more edible part and the right, spitting out or spitting the sunflower seeds into a receptacle, a paper cup here. Another phrasal verb is to spit on. Again, we might be expelling either saliva or an object onto someone or something. Another example of this. Don't spit your gum on the sidewalk. So there's another imperative, this time negative, right? We're telling people what not to do. Again, that's gross. Nobody wants to step into that. Now let's move on and talk about a few more phrasal verbs. The next one we'll discuss is to spit out. This could mean to forcefully expel something from one's mouth. An example of this: he spat the treat out after taking a big bite. Right? So you can imagine someone eating something, realizing, oh, gross, yuck, oh, right? And they expel it from their mouth. A second way to use spit out can mean to succeed in saying something, especially with difficulty. Sometimes you might encounter this when someone is a bit reluctant to share how they're really feeling or maybe what really happened. So maybe someone might say to it, will you spit out an answer, right? Just talk, right? Say something. Okay? That is not a literal saliva or object from one's mouth. A third way to use spit out can mean to say something in a very aggressive and forceful way. An example of that: the customer spat out obscenities at the store manager. So again, this is someone cursing, swearing at another person. Another phrasal verb we might encounter is to spit up. This is most commonly used with babies, but the meaning here is to vomit, right? So food, milk, something that the baby has digested is now coming back up and out. So an example of this: the baby has been spitting up more than normal. Should we call the doctor? That's an example of the present perfect progressive. We're talking about an action that started in the past, continues into the present, right? And so this person is saying, right? It might be a little normal to have a little bit, but something here seems odd. Our last phrasal verb we'll discuss is to spit with. This can mean to be extremely angry or frustrated. An example of that: he was spitting with fury the entire game. So maybe we're describing a coach or a fan. Again, having these strong, intense, angry emotions. She was spitting with fury is an example of the past progressive. So we're describing an ongoing or continuing action. Now let's spend a moment looking at some words that are related to our verb spit. And the first word we'll discuss is just the noun form of this word. One way you see this noun used connects very easily and smoothly to our verb, and that's to refer to saliva. And most commonly, you're going to hear that noun used when it's saliva being expelled or projected from one's mouth. So, an example of that: the mom tried to clean her child's face with a little spit and a napkin. Right? Maybe you've seen someone do that kind of, right? So there's the saliva, they've got a cloth, right? And they're going to, it's every child's nightmare, right? To have parent do something like that. Now, a second way you might encounter spit is to refer to a slender rod that will hold meat over fire, right? Maybe rotate to help cook it evenly. An example of that: they watched a video about how to roast meat on a spit before trying it for the first time. Another word you may encounter is the noun spitball. This can have a couple different meanings. The first way is to describe some type of paper that's maybe been chewed up, put in one's mouth, and then kind of molded into a ball. And usually it's thrown at someone, right? So this is, maybe it was more common, I think, a long time ago in classrooms, but an example of that in a sentence: that teacher doesn't tolerate spitballs in his classroom, right? That is going to be subject to some harsh punishment. Now, a second way you might encounter it is if you're a fan of the sport of baseball. So this, in the past, was a type of pitch that was used where someone would use saliva or some other substance to get the spit on the ball to move more in a more complicated or erratic way and make it harder for someone to hit. that kind of pitch. Those have been outlawed in Major League Baseball, but an example of this in a sentence might be, Gaylord Perry was famous for throwing spitballs. Now I've got one more word for us to discuss. It is also spitball, but now it's as a verb. When we use this as a verb, we're referring to kind of like a brainstorm, idea generation. So people are going to throw out ideas or suggestions for discussion. An example of this in a sentence. Let's spitball a few ideas about future events. Here, someone wants everybody to suggest, what could we do? Maybe where could we do this at? Right? And begin that process of collecting ideas. Well, thanks again to Artem for suggesting today's verb, and I thank you all for watching. Have a great day.